Oh.
A lot of people ask me if they could see like my collection room and a lot of the wrestling stuff that I've collected over the years. So I figured it'd be a lot easier if I just make a video and post it on YouTube and let everybody see what kind of stuff I do have in my collection room. So first of all, I'm going to show these here are the original LJN figures that came out in the 80s. I have just about every one of them except for the Big Boss Man. I think I need him and the Warlord and Ravishing Rick Rude in the originals. And then up here, these are some of the glasses that came out in the 80s. And I'm not sure who bought these out or who put these out, but of course here's two of my favorite ones, Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. And then they also have Hacksaw Jim Duggan, British Beefcake, Demolition, Axe and Smash, and the Ultimate Warrior. I'm thinking they also had a Hogan out in the set, but I don't have him. Down here, we have some of the Hasbro figures that came out in the early 90s. And if I'm not mistaken, I have just about every single one of them. But there's the ring that came out with them in the 90s. This shelf here is dedicated to my custom figures. These are figures that are one-of-a-kind figures. They were hand-painted. Most of them were made by a guy in New York. And what happened is I stumbled upon these on eBay, and I became a fan of these because I was always a fan of the original LJN figures. And with these being made here, you know, custom made, hand-painted, you know, a lot of figures that was never made, they now have figures for, or the guy actually made me figures for, figures that was never made back in the 80s. You have the Road Warriors, Ted DiBiase in his wrestling gear, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. There's an indie wrestler, El Drunko. You have Demolition, Axe, and Smash. Now Axe they did make, but they never had a Smash figure. So there's the Smash. You've got Nasawa from Japan. Down here we've got a wrestling gear Iron Sheik, Sandman, Doink the Clown, Virgil, the Hart Foundation, Brother Love. Up here you have a Ultimate Warrior that was hand painted for his gear from WrestleMania 5. Here is the Ravishing Rick Rude figure. This figure was hand painted. This is the original LJN figure of Rick Rude, but it was hand painted, and as you can see on the back, the guy even painted the Ultimate Warrior. This is the gear that he wore at WrestleMania 5. Also, Bobby the Brain Heenan from WrestleMania 5 in that same match. There's the outfit that Bobby Heenan wore. And all that again has been hand painted. This here is probably one of my favorite Jimmy Hart figures. I like Jimmy Hart, and this is one of my favorite Jimmy Hart figures. And of course you see the tuxedo jacket and all the musical notes and stuff. And again, like I say, this was an original LJN figure that the guy in New York just took it and he hand painted it, and he went over it and took molding clay and made like a new figure. So that's one of my favorite Jimmy Hart figures. Up here is some of the classic superstars that I have had. Anytime I work with a guy, I always get him to sign a figure for me. Right here is Buff Bagwell, Jimmy Hart, Ron Simmons, the Honky Tonk Man, Kevin Sullivan, and then of course this wall here is a lot of the figures, the classic superstar figures that Jack's bought out for years. I was always a big fan of the Legends figures. I like them more so than the current guys. So I have just about every classic superstar that you can think of. If you can show this wall here, there is set 1 at the top, Series 2, Series 3, Series 4, and Series 5, and on down. And then over here just kind of got all mixed up. But these are some of my favorite figures as well, the classic superstars. I have an indie promotion, ASW, and one of the legends that we worked with a couple years ago was the Honky Tonk Man. And this is the actual guitar that Honky Tonk Man used on that show. He signed it, and you can see on the back where it's cracked, This is the guitar he used to hit Madman Pondo over the head. So he even signed on here that he hit Madman Pondo and put the date, and he signed his name to us. So that's an actual guitar that the Honky Tonk Man used at a show. And then over here, this is one of my favorite parts of my collection. These are actual ring-worn jackets. And I've been blessed to become good friends with some of the guys in wrestling. Dennis Condrey of the Midnight Express gave me this jacket. And this is one of the jackets that he wore to the ring with Bobby Eaton and him and Jimmy and Bobby when they were doing their run again. You can see on the back it has Loverboy Dennis. This here, one of my favorite people, of course, is Jimmy Hart. And this is one of his jackets that he wore at the WrestleMania Hall of Fame ceremony a couple years ago. And on the back you can even see Legends of WrestleMania on the jacket. And that was for the video game that came out a couple years ago. Jimmy Hart had this jacket made to publicize that video game. And he wore this jacket to the actual Hall of Fame ceremony at WrestleMania. I'm not sure what number it was. I'm thinking it was 2006, 2000, wait a minute. Had to be a little later, so it's probably 2009, 2010. One of those years. If you go back and watch the Hall of Fame ceremony, you'll see Jimmy Hart wearing this actual jacket. And then, if you look behind you there, I've got some chairs. Those are actual pay-per-view chairs that I have gotten from some of the events that has taken place. Those are the pay-per-view chairs that they give you when you go and you sit ringside. You get to actually take your chair home. So those are some of the events there. There's Vengeance from a couple years back with Randy Orton on it. One of my favorite chairs is, of course, the Survivor Series. It's got all the guys that's pictured on it like cartoons. Here you've got the Royal Rumble. That was one of my favorite gifts they did with that back in 2005. This here is an NWA Legends chair that I had printed up a few years ago, and I actually had this airbrushed, and it was for the FanFest convention. It was August in 2005. I have all the legends that was there at that convention sign it. Here up here's one of my favorites, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Baron Von Raschke. Then of course right here you see Ricky Morton. I think that's Molly Holly. I think that's Ivory, Bret the Hitman Hart. So we just had a lot of the guys sign it. So that's one of my favorite things too. It's my autographed chair there. Down here is some of the newer figures that they've made. These are the new Mattel figures. Those are the Legends figures that they just came out with those. Then over here, if you can get over here, these are the LJN figures that I still have in the package. And of course some of these, most people remember these when they were a kid going into Kmart's in the Hills, and you'd always see these figures hanging on the shelf. But there are those. These here are the Hasbro figures I have that's still mint in the package. This is probably the one that's worth the most. This is the Sean Waltman 1-2-3 Kid figure. This is a very, very rare figure because not many people has the green cards. They call this the green card series. And not many people had these figures because they didn't make many of them. But that's the Sean Waltman figure, and you can see it's still perfect in the package. Up here, you'll see my horror film collection. I've got a lot of the 18-inch figures that I can't think of the name of the company that put those out, but you can see Edward Scissorhands, Michael Myers, Captain Spaulding, I think, from House of a Thousand Corpses, Hellraiser, Pinface, or whatever, I think that's what they called him, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, of course the Crow, that's Brandon Lee, who played the original Crow. That's his figure. So we've got all these figures here, and then we've got some smaller ones, and so yeah, that's basically my collection there. Stop it.